So I want to ask you about how to become an intrapreneur in a company. And specifically, I think about a client that I'm coaching at the moment. There's actually a few of them. And one particular scenario is he's a senior position in a software company. He's a manager and he somewhat enjoys his role. He's not passionately fulfilled. He thinks that there is opportunity for him within the company. So the company is going places. He'd like to do something different. And when I talked to him about the Bedrock principles and specifically the 10x mentality. And he gives me a little pushback on that one. So I want to get your perspective on it. And the pushback I get is it's all very well understanding in concept the 10x mentality, but in practice, when you're working in a job and you're doing your 40 hours a week and there's specifically designed things that you need to be doing and delivering on, like how do you 10x that? Because that's 1x essentially, like you're doing what you need to do. And maybe you can understand 2x, like being a great productive employee, but how do you 10x in that environment?
So if I can paraphrase, we have employee X,
yes,
who's a wannabe intrapreneur, and is feeling a little bit constrained by his environment and doesn't know where to start to be able to kind of blow out performance or results when he has a day job to perform.
Right, and he's trying to do a good job at that day job. He just doesn't know how to break out of that. Right.
So a few questions that would come to mind. The first thing is there's no shortcut to being able to 10x, and I think that's the first kind of error that a lot of folks fall into is, how can I change my environment? Like, what's the silver bullet? And so that's part one. There's no silver bullet. So my first question to Max would be, what does star performance look like in your current role? And I'll share the story to that. Through my career as an entrepreneur in corporations, I can think of countless wasted hours, if I'm really candid and blunt, of wannabe entrepreneurs taking up inordinate amounts of time with good intention of wanting to share ideas, which are very important to hear, but on topics that really weren't relevant to driving performance within the role or group that they were in. And if you look beyond to their performance level, some of it was lackluster. And so kind of going through back to Max, what does star performance look like? And is he knocking it out of the park? That's kind of foundation level. Right. And I think that's your point on, you have 40 hours a week. Right. What are you doing with it? Then the next part would be to say to him, what is the organization's goal or vision? Right. And does he have a firm grasp on that? So I'm going to pause there because from your coaching with Max, do you think he's got a firm hold on star performance and the organization's goal and vision? Because that's going to start to frame how he's going to start to build 2x, 3x, or be able to contribute kind of that owner mentality, which is really what he ultimately seems to be striving for.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I think you touched on 3 different ideas there, if I paraphrase. So one is, let's just look at your job that you're being hired to do. Are you doing a good job there? Are you doing the best job there? And that's a sort of a focus point in making sure that you check that box first, because it's essentially, and I'll put some words in your mouth if you correct me, like essentially you're not fair to yourself or to the organization if you're not doing the best job there.
Right.
So that's one thing. The second being, if what he's doing is continually, and this is maybe the client that you're talking about, that if he's looking outside of what he's doing and is excited about all these other ideas, then he's potentially has to dig into his bedrock a little bit to say, well, why is that? It might be that what you're doing you're not passionate about, and therefore you're searching for other stuff that gets you excited.
Right.
And so that's something to delve into, because it could be an issue. And so you've got to reflect on that role that he's doing. And you didn't necessarily say this, I think you touched on that, but what I'm seeing with him is when I've prompted him and said, okay, are there other people within the organization that you've seen are being able to 10x it, so that they're in a similar position, that they're stellar at what they do? And he'll respond with, yes, but they have X, or they have Y, or they have Z. So he sort of sees that it's possible within the organization, but it's almost not possible for him because he doesn't have whatever attribute it is. So they have X opportunity, they have access to the CEO or a senior person, or whatever thing that he's searching for. He's just coming up with all these reasons or excuses that it's not available to him. So I think there's sort of 3 things. Did I capture some of what you're touching on?
Yeah, I think you did. And it's such a big topic because, to your point, one, the biggest piece is most of us are our own worst enemies, right? And we have to get out of our heads or out of our way sometimes. Sure. So how do we help this individual have the courage, and that's obviously a bedrock principle, to dig in to maybe acknowledge what their blockages are. Maybe they are afraid to actually be an owner. You know, most of us have a hard time acknowledging that maybe we don't want the responsibility of ownership. And while our peers and friends are out there running businesses and being entrepreneurial, we love the idea, but maybe the thought of being on the line risk-wise is too much for us, but we're not ready to acknowledge that. So then we look in our employment scenarios and we have this internal struggle of I want more, I want to do more, but don't know how to kind of put that intrapreneurial hat on, which is a little bit of security around the risk structure, but with more than employer mentality. And that still comes back to Bedrock on digging into really understand why we do what we do or why we don't do what we do. So is he at a place, Aaron, of being able to truly reflect as to why he has all these justifications?
Right.
What do you think?
So he's not there yet, I don't think. I'm trying to coach him to get to that point, and it's a slow process because you'll put out a question and get him to think about it. And so just an analogy or metaphor that comes to mind is when I did this Tough Mudder race a while ago, I found myself before every obstacle standing back and just trying to assess whether I could do the obstacle. And what the mind tends to do is you look at other people to say, okay, well, how are they doing it? And then I'll model them.
Right.
But what I saw happening, and I'm aware of the thinking process, again, it's all stuff that you can get in the digging into the Bedrock course, essentially, but it's awareness of what your mind does. And the mind in that instance was looking at these people and saying, okay, that person did it, but they were taller than me, or that person did it and they were faster than me, or that person did it but they had shoes that had more grip than me. And so you see that your mind sort of searches for all these excuses as to why you can't do it, and that's just tricks of the mind. And so to your point, you've got to dig in and say, one is this something I really want to do? Because at the end of the day, you have to get to that mental toughness, that the resilience to just say, I've got to try, I've got to risk falling, because I've got to put myself in that position. I've got to take the courage to commit, because for me, I could watch so many people hop over the obstacle, but until I actually tried, who knows if I could succeed or not. So in this instance, it's getting to that point and having of courage. But to your point, is really understanding, I think, the risk. How much risk are you willing to tolerate? And so I think he's at this point and stuck in this role, not entirely happy, but not willing to risk it. And it's the coaching I'm giving him is just trying to get him to understand that and saying, well, why are you staying? And what are some of the things that give you the energy and the motivation? What excites you? And why are you interested in being an entrepreneur? And what is it about that you think it's going to give you? So just exploring those as the foundation, just to find out where those feelings or emotions are coming from, because I think that's at the digging, that's the core to find out what he's about, and that will sort of give him the baseline. So I'm not sure if that makes sense or resonates.
Absolutely. I think a simple phrase in what you've described is own your circumstances. Yeah. Right? And life presents circumstances to all of us that maybe aren't ideal, aren't what we would choose. Right. But own them. And in the words of Sheryl Sandberg, lean in, right? So maybe it's not great. Lean in, and how do you make it work? So perhaps Max, let's call him Max, can't financially or due to inhibiting fear, cannot make a move into something external. He needs security of an income. And right now maybe can't find an ideal dream job because he doesn't even know what that really looks like. But he knows he wants to do more. Let's own that. Own the fact that right now you have a great role that's secure, and that you have this desire to do more. That's awesome, right? Own that. And then figure out what is star performance, what are the company's goals, and how do you play a bigger part in helping to achieve that. To give a very, very simple picture to that, even on a simple production line, you might argue that a production worker can't make any improvements. But it happens all the time where the efficiencies to be found in packaging, in speed of processing, in how machinery is leveraged, using it on 24 hours versus 12-hour shifts. There's a lot of things you can do in the very role you're in. So it really is own your circumstances, understand the world of those circumstances, lean in and make it happen, right? And have fun with it. And when you start to knock out star performance, instead of 1x getting to 2x, 3x performance, amazing things happen. Now you've got credibility to go and have conversations with CEOs or other key stakeholders with ideas that more than likely can contribute to that entrepreneurial capacity. Hope that makes sense.
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And I'll just sort of summarize from my perspective. And this is the advice that I would give him based on what
Yes.
you're saying. One is, we haven't explicitly said this, but I think we know that this is the case, that it's a marathon. It's not a race. That you can get there, and you just have to have a long-term perspective of getting there and have some patience. Two is, do the best you can do in your job. And more than that, make sure you put yourself in the position where you understand how you're adding value to the company. So don't think about yourself, just think about how you add value.
Yes.
Because in my experience, when you take that position and you're looking to create value and add value, then you get noticed.
Right.
And the third is, think about essentially why you're doing this, why you want it, and truly, where is this coming from? Do you want a more senior position for the title or for the significance or the recognition, or do you want it because you're passionate about the job and you're passionate you can make a difference to the company? So really getting clear with what you want to do, because I think it's at that point that will give you the courage and the motivation to take that leap if it's truly something that you want. So I think that's great advice. And ultimately, another topic that surrounds this is trying to create a safe risk environment, right? Because this takes risk and this takes courage. So that was great. Thank you. It's a great answer.
Great chatting.